Welcome back to my series where I list some improvements that can be made for Marvel Spider-Man 2. And if you're new here, I don't know, welcome. I don't know. What do I say if someone's new here? Like, if they're not, like, I can't say welcome back. What do I say? Like, greetings? Like, I don't know. But I'm getting off topic anyways, so let me start getting into some of the improvements that I think Marvel Spider-Man 2 can make from the combat system from Miles Morales and also from, obviously, Spider-Man PS4. And also, real quick, I just wanted to say, I do not think the combat system in the first two games is bad by any means. In fact, it's one of my favorite combat systems of all time. And one thing I love so much about it is the foundation it laid. Because there is so much room for improvement that can just push this system to an even higher level than it already is. So let me start listing some new features I would like to see. So the first thing I would love to see added is like a block and or like parry option. Now other games have obviously done this, but the most similar and most like close to home, I guess, like option or like parry system that they could use is the one seen in Sifu. If you haven't played Sifu, I highly suggest it. But anyway, Sifu has one of the best combat systems out there, and I think the way they do parries is really well done and it works really well, and I think that would also translate really well to Spider-Man 2. And adding something like this is just another thing that would spice up the combat with more depth and variety, along with the dodge mechanic we already have. And coinciding with this, we would have certain enemy types that you can't use the dodge button on, so you have to parry, or vice versa. You have certain enemies where you can't parry and you have to dodge. If you guys are picking up what I'm putting down, then I think you can understand what I'm trying to say. And I think something like this would already just massively improve upon the combat system. Like the Arkham games had the counter option, and yeah, I love those games, but like a parry option is just way more engaging than just the counter option, especially with like parry timings and certain stuff of that nature. It's just more skillful and engaging than a counter mechanic. You can actually see in the Marvel Spider-Man 2 like teaser trailer, it looks like they may already be adding this parry option, because if you look at the trailer, this girl like jumps at him and he looks at her real quick, and it looks like he does like some type of little parry mechanic or something like that. I may be reaching here, but it really does look like that might be what this is. The next thing I need them to do is get rid of this. Like, if I have one complaint about the combat system, it's this. I actually don't know what they were thinking with this, and all it really needs to do is a simple quick fix. Just make it faster. And don't make Spider-Man look like he's struggling to pull someone towards him or struggling to pull a gun out of someone's hand. Basically, they can just do this. If they just did that, that's just boom, quick, simple fix. This would also translate to pulling weapons out of someone's hands, and you can either hold triangle to immediately pull the weapon and either continue to hold triangle to throw it back at an enemy, or just let go of it and let it fly in some random direction. This is already in the first game, but all they really need to do is just make it faster. And also either get rid of this wind-up animation, make it faster, or just make a couple different new animations for this. The next thing I really want is more button combos, and I think this would be very proficient for some things such as quick-fire gadgets, similar to that of the Arkham games. And the main button that can be used for this is L1. Just like we see with Miles and his electric abilities, but instead we could see this for Peter and his gadgets. I've got a couple possible combo moves we could use, but first let me start with the gadgets. And also I want to talk about some of the gadgets they can just leave out, because I feel like they make the combat too easy, or they just don't feel right in the hands of Spider-Man. And that's just the spider drones and the suspension matrix, really. The drones are just absolutely broken. They're basically just the Spider Bro suit power, but there's 4 of them. And the suspension matrix is just something I don't think most people use. Like, I sure as hell barely ever use it, and I really just don't feel like that's some shit that Spider-Man would use. I don't know, it just feels weird. And these gadgets can be replaced with something better, and that's like a freeze web, similar to that of the Arkham games and like the freeze blast. And you're probably thinking to yourself, this guy's mentioned in the Arkham games a lot, and yeah, that's because they both have great free flow combat systems, and I don't see any problem with taking some things from something that's also great. So yeah, the 2 gadgets I want to see is the freeze web. I don't know how this would work scientifically, but who the fuck cares, it's fiction. And the other gadget I would love to see is the tether web or the tightrope web. And in all honesty, this doesn't even need to be a gadget, really. They could just implement it into the aim system we already used in some puzzles for Miles Morales, and they could just make it so that you like hold R1 to activate this instead of just tapping it like you regularly do when you press L2 and R1. Not only would this be extremely useful for stealth and would let you get really creative with stealth, but imagine putting one of these things down in a combat scenario and being able to throw someone into it and have them bounce back to you like a fucking WWE rope. And you could hit them with like a body slam or punch them in their shit as they're coming back to you. Or you could connect it to 2 people and have them smack into each other like this. Put the little thing down, you point launch to the middle of the thing, and the 2 enemies would just, you know, bonk each other on the head or something. I think that would be really cool. And now that we got some of the gadgets out of the way, we can start assigning button combos. But this is something I feel as though the player should be able to do for themselves. So I'll show you like this concept. Firstly, all these 4 buttons should be of possible use combined with the L1 button. So you could have it like how I have it, or someone else might want to coordinate another gadget to one of these button combos like this. And also this wouldn't really translate over to Miles' gameplay because he's got the Venom powers, and Peter could just have quickfire gadgets, and I think that would be a good way to differentiate the 2s in their like gameplay styles. Another thing I would like to see is the ability to pull someone towards you in the air, like in air combat, just like I was talking about with the clothesline on the ground where you pull someone to you like in the Arkham games, but not only being able to do this in the ground, but also doing it in the air. So we could have the ability to not only web strike to people in the air, but also pull them back towards you manually. And for the button assignment for this, I think they could just put it on the D-pad, since pretty much no real important buttons take up space on the D-pad. And the reason it would be on the D-pad is because obviously the hold triangle action is already in use when throwing someone back onto the ground or pulling someone into the air while you're in air combat. So D-pad would just be a quick or convenient option, and being able to pull someone towards you in the air along with what you can already do in the air is just something that would just add more variety and depth. Another thing they need to get rid of is the unfluid motion after dodging on the ground. They fixed this with the air dodges in Miles Morales, but it was still present for ground dodges. You guys probably know what I'm talking about, but for those who don't, just play the game, you know, just press circle while you're on the ground and just dodge, and then see like you'll see like the little pause you get after a dodge. It just makes you pause there for like half a second. It's not like a major problem by any means, but if they just kept it fluid and didn't have this little pause after a dodge, it would give the player more control, and it would just make things more fluid, similar to that of Uncharted. The next thing I would like to see is environmental takedowns, like what we see in Arkham Knight. I don't think I really need to explain this. It's pretty straightforward if you've played Batman Arkham Knight, and even if you haven't played Arkham Knight, I think environmental takedowns is just pretty straightforward either way. And for yet another Arkham reference, another thing I really like about those games is the combo system, and how you progressively get faster the higher your combo. Miles Morales made it so that you get finishers once you get a certain amount of combo, and I really like that change. And I would also like to see enemies get slower and Spider-Man get faster the higher your combo, just like how Batman does in the Arkham games. I would also like them to get rid of the ability to heal yourself through combo buildup. I think a much better system would be if you start with one heal up in the beginning of the game per fight scenario, and then progressively throughout the game you unlock more heal ups, kind of similar to how Jedi Fallen Order did it, with how you find healing stims progressively throughout the game. Only Spider-Man 2 you could just make it so that you either find more heal ups throughout the map like in Jedi Fallen Order, or you can just have the heal ups be an upgrade. I think this would make the game much more challenging, and it would just be a better system than having virtually unlimited heal ups throughout fights through building them up through the focus meter. I would also like to see wall combat, kind of similar to Web of Shadows, but not as like rambunctious, I guess, as the combat in that game. I've seen people talking about how they want some aspects of Web of Shadows to be implemented into Insomniac's game, but I gotta be honest, it's cool and all in that game, but the style of that game is just not as realistic as the style Insomniac has given us. Now, I know it's fiction and it's a video game, but you still know what I mean when I'm talking about like how the realistic style of the combat is. Web of Shadows feels and looks a lot different in their mechanics. Insomniac has more of a firm, realistic style, and most of the attacks feel like they have real weight behind them, while Web of Shadows is more slick and flashy, and attacks kind of seem like they just go through enemies and you're just doing damage, if you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of similar to like God of War with like the Blades of Chaos when you're using them. It's kind of hard to describe, but if you get me, you get me. I just don't think a style like that would transfer over that well to Insomniac's style and the style they've given us. So things like using enemy bodies as surfboards is cool and all, but I just really don't think that fits with the Insomniac style, and it would just be a little off-putting. Like, as you can see from the background gameplay, it's a lot different from what Insomniac has given us, but that doesn't mean they can't give us a good form of realistic looking wall combat. Like, they can most definitely take aspects from Web of Shadows, most importantly the camera mechanics when doing combat on the walls, and how it transitions smoothly from wall to air to ground combat. I know you can hop onto a wall by pressing circle and then bounce towards an enemy by pressing square right after, but that's not what I mean. Like, imagine this: you're running on or run onto a wall, and you can just easily hop off it and punch an enemy by pressing square, and that enemy could be on the ground or the air, either way, depending on how close to you they are. Or you could be running along the ground by holding R2 and then you press triangle to web strike to an enemy. If they can make this run fluidly with the camera angles, then switching from being off a wall and onto a wall and actual wall combat itself, this would be a great improvement in addition to the combat system. The next two things is something I mentioned in my traversal improvements video, but they need to add the ability to keep your momentum while shooting gadgets in the air, again similar to Uncharted, and also let us be able to dodge while swinging from your web, not just when you let go of it. I think those two things are pretty straightforward, don't really need that much of an explanation. The next thing I want to discuss is the symbiote gameplay, and there's a couple things I would like to see with this. The main thing is pretty much just a completely new skill tree for the symbiote suit, where you can slowly gain new abilities the more you use it, and it makes you feel more powerful, to the point of feeling where you just don't want to take the suit off. And narratively, this would be a great connection between Peter and the player, because we would be feeling just as Peter would be, with this new power and not wanting to get rid of it, if that's obviously the narrative choice they go for, but I have no idea on that, so I mean, I just think it would just be a cool idea, and it's been done before, but whatever. I'll talk about the new abilities in a second, but the small things I feel should be done. First would be more health and also more resistance to attacks, because obviously the suit just makes Peter more durable, and also just buffing the damage Peter outputs, and enemies like brutes can just be hit like normal enemies now, and you don't have to web them up or stagger them to hit them. Virtually just make them a bit more OP with the black suit. This may take away from some of the challenge, but I mean, that's kind of the point, because Peter is more powerful with the black suit, and we need to feel that way as well. Second thing is, I think with the black suit, similar to what I was suggesting with Miles' gameplay, like once Peter has the black suit, we shouldn't be able to use quickfire gadgets, and instead we get tendril abilities that would essentially be Peter's version of Miles' electric powers, only in Peter's case, instead of electricity pulling enemies up into the air with him, it would be the tendrils pulling up people into the air. And obviously this would translate to the other moves that Miles can pull off, like the ground pound and the venom dash. But to add on to this, instead of Miles having his little like electric outburst he has, I don't even remember what the ability was called, but you can see it on the screen. We could just have Peter's tendrils grab every enemy around him and like spin them around and send them all flying or something of that nature, if you can kind of visualize that in your head. And I'd also like to see a regular tendril like slam move similar to this. And to pull this off, you could just press like square and triangle at the same time. And the last little minor set of things is a completely different animation set that uses the same mechanics we already have, just with more brutal animations. The type of animations that make you feel like you're killing people, even though in the first game I feel like it kind of already does feel like that, but just make it more. And also just make the number of combo you have to build up to get a finisher lower. So instead of like a 15 times combo, you have like a 17 times combo you have to build up to get a finisher with the black suit. And that's really about all I have to say with the symbiote in terms of like combat changes and stuff that you could do with it. And the last little thing in terms of Peter's just regular combat improvements, just small little basic things, I would just like to see a lot more animations and variety in animations, and not just more finisher animations, but also like more just regular attack animations. Like there's a lot of mods that have come out for PC that add more animations to Peter's moveset, and it's so fun to just play with a bunch of different ones. It would be really cool if they let you like change Peter's moveset like yourself, and you could pick some certain animations, like if you're picking up what I'm putting down there, but I doubt they'll do that, but it would be really cool. And also let's get rid of some of the dumb finisher animations like this shit. I don't even know what this is. Like how is someone getting knocked out by this? Now that all the suggested gameplay mechanics and features are out of the way, I can now talk about the enemy variety, and this is the part of the game I think they can really add a lot to. Now what we can do to improve and add upon this, well, there's a couple things that they can do, but also keep in mind some enemy types are tied to narrative implications, such as the Sable Militia in the first game, so I'm just gonna do my best here. So let me start with the new enemy types I think could be introduced, and also the ones we see in the trailer. For the first enemy types we see in the trailer, we see a girl with weapons, like these blades things, and it looks like she has like body armor on her. I think this indicates this is like a faction of enemies that are highly skilled, so this could be a form of martial arts or like highly skilled enemies, and these enemies will be able to dodge your attacks, and you can either dodge the attack if the enemy is holding like a sword or something, or you can parry their attacks if it's just a regular martial arts enemy with no weapon. Or of course you could just parry them if they have a weapon, or if they don't have a weapon, and they could just have certain attacks that these enemies use where they have like a red thing like most games do, and they have parryable attacks and unparryable attacks, if you know what I mean. And the high skill enemies would function similarly to the special weapon enemies, just with a little bit more depth. They could also bring in high skill gun enemies that could also dodge your attacks and have like certain sets of grenades like stun, freeze, electric grenades. They could function similarly to the purge troopers like in Jedi Fallen Order, but again with the martial arts enemies, this would be a really good way to use the parry and dodge feature and just implement and intertwine those two things together in the combat system with this enemy type. The next enemy type is drone enemies, similar to the ones we see in Arkham Knight for stealth, and also similar to the enemies we see in Gotham Knights for the regular combat. If you've played both games, that's pretty straightforward, and if you haven't, just look up on YouTube drone enemies from Gotham Knights. The third enemy type is like, now since that Oscorp has created the symbiote and Norman most likely knows the symbiote's weaknesses, there could be a group of mercenaries that Norman hires similar to the Sable Militia that uses like incendiary rounds or sound-based weapons. I know it might sound like a cop-out rehashing the old game and like Norman's just hiring another militia for the city. Also, Norman couldn't hire like another Sable Militia type thing because he's not the mayor anymore, but he could just hire this private militia, if you like, you know what I mean. But there's really nothing wrong with rehashing old aspects of the old game, and it would make sense for Norman to want to get the symbiote back and like put all his efforts into it, especially if it just leaves Harry's body and that's the thing that's keeping Harry alive, which it seems like that is. Another thing that I think would work really well narratively is if Miles Warren, aka the Jackal, was introduced as like a side quest, and he was the one giving people superpowers and working with Tombstone or something, and this could cause new enemy types to arise with superpowers. The reason I think this would work really well narratively, because if you've watched Spectacular Spider-Man, you would know that Miles Warren is the one who gives Kraven powers in that show, or like that string of episodes. I think if Spider-Man 2 did something similar with Kraven, where he can't beat Spider-Man as a regular man, so he goes to like an outsource to get powers to beat Spider-Man, I think this would work really well narratively and give us a good possibility of good and new enemy variety. I mean, like, if it's giving people superpowers, there is a wide amount of ideas that they could have for different superpowered enemy types, and I think this would really work well narratively and also would be great for gameplay. Now let me talk about the enemy types that should return and how they can be improved. The first enemy I think should return is the gun enemies. Pretty straightforward. They don't really need to do much to improve these enemies. Maybe just have like two of them try to shoot you at the same time, so that maybe you have to like double tap circle to dodge instead of only tapping circle once, and just making them a bit more aggressive on higher difficulties so that they try to shoot you more frequently. The next is the regular enemies, and this would also translate over. Just try to have two of them attack you at the same time so that you can't parry one without getting hit by another, or you have to double tap the parry button so that you can parry both attacks at the same time, or just dodge one attack from another enemy so that you don't have to worry about the other enemy that's trying to hit you hitting you, if that makes sense. And also, again, just make them more aggressive on higher difficulties. The third enemy type I think could probably make a return, and I say types because there's multiple different enemy types like there was in Miles Morales with these enemies, but you probably guess what I'm gonna say. It's the underground. I think it makes sense for them to return, and I actually think they might be, because for one, Peter's iron spider legs look like they are made of programmable matter, and for two, after Finn's death, it's never confirmed what actually happened to them, so they could still be around, and I think giving them like a new leader or something would just be a good side mission or something like that. But most importantly, I just think it's because of the programmable matter. Like, there's just an infinite amount of possibilities and what weapons enemies can have and what they can do with those weapons, such as swords, guns, shields, basically everything they use in Miles Morales, but also give them an upgrade with more weapons and more variety in movesets. Another thing they could do with the underground is add another advanced version of the Sable and Hammerhead jetpack enemies, but obviously for the underground, with more variety in their movesets mixed with underground weapons. I don't think I really need to break that down. I think it's just if you can visualize it in your head. But adding on to the underground enemy types, I would have mentioned this earlier, but I think it's best to just bring it up now because these two things coincide with each other. But what I'm talking about is they could give Peter shock gauntlets so that he can also mess with the underground's tech like Miles's powers do. And additionally, this would be good because if Venom attaches to Peter while Peter has the shock gauntlets, it would give a good reason as to why Miles's electricity isn't a weakness to Venom, like how electricity has been a weakness to Venom in comics before, but he has overcome that weakness as well. But narratively, I think that Peter having shock gauntlets and Venom bonding to that, because Venom can also bond to weapons as well, not just people, this would be a good reason as to why Miles's electricity doesn't affect Venom that much. And they definitely need Venom to not be weak to electricity, otherwise he would just go out pretty easily by Miles, and that wouldn't really be a compelling story because Venom wouldn't really be that big of a threat if Miles's electricity affected him. But whatever, they could just say he wasn't weak to electricity in general, but I think the offer that I'm proposing is just better, and I think the shock gauntlets would just be a great addition. I mean, like, we already have a similar version of shock gauntlets with the electricity punch suit power, but the shock gauntlets wouldn't just be used for narrative implications, it would also be used for Peter to be able to affect the underground's tech with the shock gauntlets and obviously his electric webs too. The next enemy is brutes. Again, I don't really think they need to do much. I think they should just keep the regular ones, the underground brutes, and the ones they added in the DLC with the miniguns, and even give them some more type of gun. The only thing I can really think of is, like I just said, giving them different types of guns, adding a brute version of each different enemy type I've proposed, so like a superpowered brute and a martial arts brute. Maybe make them throw other enemies at you or throw some heavy objects around the environment at you. I think that's really all I can think of for the brutes at this moment. And the last enemy type I think should return is the special weapon enemies, sword enemies and the electric whip enemies. Again, maybe just add some more variety in the special move enemies moveset, add different types of special weapons for some of these enemies, and yeah, that's pretty much just it. I know I didn't really go over suit powers and the iron spider legs in this video, and that's because I can either take them or leave them. I personally don't care for either of them. I use the suit powers and have fun with some of them, but they can be a little OP, which is fine. I mean, if someone wants to use an OP suit power, that's all for them. That's another thing that's great about the combat system, is I personally love what they've done with the combat system and how many like options there are and how creative you can get with the system. You want to be OP? That's fine. If you want to give yourself more of a challenge, that's also fine, because that's just what the combat system has allowed for. But me personally, I like a little bit more of a challenge, so I really don't care for the suit powers that much. And also with the iron spider legs that they're introducing, I have no clue what they're going to be doing with them. I don't know if they're just going to be a similar version to the iron spider legs we already got. I doubt that's going to be similar because they're definitely going to do something else. But again, I can either take them or leave them. I don't really care about the iron spider legs. I really don't care about them. If you would like to see some of these ideas or have ideas of your own that I didn't mention, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear some of y'all ideas, and I would also love to hear how you guys feel about the ideas that I've mentioned in this video. But if you like this video, please go check out my series on this, just improvements of Marvel Spider-Man 2, because I think I've proposed some great ideas for other categories as well, like the traversal and a couple other things. I thank you all for watching, and I appreciate everyone who stuck to the end, and yeah.